When it comes down to getting out on the field and you're playing with the dials, because we do shoot in full manual, then it comes down to what are your go-to settings that you're going to use most of the time. And in most occasions, we're using somewhere between f11 to f16, although nowadays, because of what I've mentioned with quality of images, I'm tending to go more with f11 than f16 and trying to adjust my hyperfocal distance and where subjects are on the basis of that. So that, as I said, is a default thought of f11 to f16. So the question is, when do we need to go lower? When do we need to go higher? So in a situation where I need more light to achieve the same exposure for an image, then I enlarge the aperture. So I go down to f8, f5.6, f4, f2.8 even, and so forth. But the question is, if I do need more light to do that, then will a longer shutter speed affect my shot? For instance, in seascapes, will pushing my ISO start to degrade quality? If the answer is yes and yes, because the above two are alternatives to enlarging your aperture, then you need to go larger, knowing that you sacrifice some depth of field, and you might need to start focus stacking your images to make sure that all of it's sharp. Okay, so that's situations where you want more light. You can either do it through shutter speed, you can either do it through ISO, recognizing those limitations, and if you've got no other option, then you can do an aperture adjustment. For night photography, which I'll discuss in the ISO section, it's rarely smaller than f5.6. In fact, the only occasion where I'm shooting f5.6 tends to be when I'm shooting star trails in a single exposure rather than stacking, or if I'm taking a twilight shot to blend in with a star shot later on. So on the whole, I'm usually going as wide open as a lens will take it, and try not to put subjects in the immediate foreground so I don't have focusing issues. And then, as I mentioned before, when will I want to risk diffraction shooting it smaller than f11? Now, there's probably two scenarios. The first we discussed was sun stars, and the second is when you want to try and get everything in the same shot without having to start focus stacking and so forth. An example of this is when there's a lot of moving elements where blending could be difficult. So the main examples that I've encountered that actually makes me want to have a better sensor camera is rapidly moving mist, for instance, coming through the sun. If you start bracketing, start blending exposures for that, you'll get different layers of clouds, different shutter speeds, etc. It could just lead to a big nightmare. And the other one is moving water with the sun reflecting off it. If you start changing certain elements of that, then you will also have difficulties with blending just because of differing appearances of water, and your chances of catching water in exactly the same state of motion in 2 frames is pretty small. So going through the answers,